the turn of the century, from about 1870s to 1900s, there were some artists involved in the arts and crafts movement. These artists and craftsmen experimented and created works that turned away from industrialization and progress. They looked to traditional or historical approaches to design. The arts and crafts movement was a response to industrialization. They wanted the craftsmanship that could not be found in mass production and mass manufacturing. The artists and crafts movement began in Britain, then continued into North America. Industrialization was still growing at a fast rate, and innovations in architecture such as skyscrapers and infrastructure such as bridges and railroad stations were being built. Just as many people embraced this progress of industry, the artists from the arts and crafts movement rebelled against it. They represented traditional craftsmanship through the use of simple forms which were used in Romantic, folk, and medieval styles of decoration. In this detail of Pimpernel wallpaper from 1876, we see an organic pattern. Morris had many skilled laborers who created using historical traditional techniques. Morris and his followers felt this anti-industrial way of creating was more sincere and made with better quality. He wanted to, and I quote, raise the dignity of craftsmanship and owners alike, and to enhance the beauty of ordinary homes. Art Nouveau was most popular from around 1890 to 1910. It is a French term meaning new art. As mentioned in the first lecture, many movements will be going on at the same time and/or will overlap with each other. Art Nouveau was inspired by natural forms and structures. Curved lines were very prevalent in these works that often contain the subjects of furniture, jewelry, and graphic and decorative arts. Unlike the arts and crafts movement, Art Nouveau embraced technology. Here we see two architectural spaces, one interior and one exterior, both designed by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. Mackintosh's work combines modern innovations and traditional forms. His work is traditional in scale with aesthetic unity. The library at Glasgow School of Art has a look and appeal of the arts and crafts movement, but is made through modern technology. While some of the art movements and artists we discuss have a purpose for creating, such as traditional or spiritual meaning, there were also artists that carried similar beliefs, such as James McNeill Whistler, who believed in art for art's sake, creating for one's own enjoyment. One such movement that embeds itself with Art Nouveau is aestheticism. Aestheticism is both literary and visual works. It did not advocate or publicly support social, moral, or political issues. In fact, they believed art should not serve any purpose at all. Now, the Art Nouveau movement was influenced by many other areas of art, such as medieval, Chinese, and Japanese art. We can see the influence of natural forms. The only area of art that does not influence Art Nouveau would be historical painting, meaning they don't try to document an historical event. With Frederick Leighton's painting titled The Bath of Psyche, we see a painting that is meant to be totally visual. It is a classical figure but serves no real purpose or meaning. It is just visually beautiful. Aubrey Beardsley was an English artist, most well known for his drawings. As you can see, his work is very stylized and decorative, using only white and black. He was attracted to romantic visions of evil and eroticism, like that of Edgar Allan Poe and many of the French symbolists. His drawings were widely produced and circulated. Again, we see the story of Salome and his stepfather Herod. We see Salome holding the head of St. John the Baptist. Here in James McNeill Whistler's The Peacock Room, from 1876 to 77, we see the Art Nouveau style created in a living room. We can see the use of nature and curved lines throughout the room. It's highly decorative with gold against the dark greenish blue walls. And if you look right here, we see two peacocks fighting. Do you know what the peacocks represent? One is rich and one is poor. They symbolize the patron and the artist. Whistler and the patron Leyland had their arguments. Leyland never commissioned Whistler for this, and so Whistler did not get paid for the work he did on this piece. Whistler, without Leyland's permission, had the public and press over to view this work, thus angering Leyland to the point where Whistler was banned from the house. This sculpture is by a Czech artist named Alphonse Mucha in 1900. This piece is called Nature. Mucha studied in Paris, where he learned about and became part of the Art Nouveau movement. This is made of gilt bronze, silver, and marble. And if you look, you can see the intricate embellishment of the headpiece here, and then also these seductive curves that move throughout this sculpture. And then it winds around in the base beautifully. The beauty of the curvilinear lines and sensual figure are trademarks of the Art Nouveau movement. Now, in Austria, there was a group of artists called the Vienna Secession. This group centered themselves around the Art Nouveau movement. The major artist of this group was Gustav Klimt. Many of you may recognize the artist and his work. Gustav Klimt was a well-established decorative painter and portraitist. He was aware of the symbolist movement, and his work shows an influence of Byzantine mosaics. He loved erotic themes, which he would often incorporate into his work, as you can see here in this piece, Detail of Dining Room Mural, made in 1905 to 1908. Many of Klimt's works embed sensual figures with highly colored decorative patterns that stand unparalleled in the rest of modern art. Many of his murals were in mosaic form using glass, enamel, semi-precious stones, and metal. The backgrounds were filled with abstract spirals that shimmered with these materials, while the heads were usually painted in. As we can see, modern art was not yet ready to go totally abstract with their work. Art Nouveau also spread into architecture. Art Nouveau mostly influenced the ornamental surface on the outside of the buildings or in the interior decorations. The use of new materials like reinforced concrete in the construction, along with glass and metal, helped define architecture during the late 1800s to the early 1900s. One of the most famous representations of Art Nouveau used in interior design during this time was a Tiffany table lamp by Louis Confer Tiffany. The intricate natural forms in the favrile, which means delicately designed colored glassware with like an iridescent surface. This gives the appearance of something handcrafted, however, it was industrially manufactured. We are going to be looking at two architects now that were important during this time, Antoni Gaudí and Victor Horta. We are not going to go into detail too much about their influences, but it is important to know that they were both strongly influenced by Eugène Emmanuel Viollet-le-Duc, who was a French architect and theorist. Now, I could easily spend an entire lecture on this one structure. This is one of the oddest pieces of architecture we will look at this semester. This is a church of the Sagrada Familia, started in 1883 to 1926 in Barcelona, Spain. The architect's name is Antoni Gaudí. He was influenced by the Romantic and symbolist concepts from the Middle Ages. He also strived to make his works look like they were derived from natural forms. Now, this church reminds me of those sand castles that children would make at the beach by, dripping the sand upon itself. Gaudí was commissioned to finish this church that had already been started as a Gothic revival. There are lots of colorful stained glass in the spires. Gaudí also made sure that color was placed on top of the spires. Although we can see the Gothic inspiration in the architecture with its curvilinear forms inspired by Art Nouveau, this building has no architectural style per se. It is unique in this respect. Gaudí never finished this church. However, there have been other architects that have taken over after his death. In fact, construction on this building continues today, long after Gaudí's death in 1926. The church's structure, including the steeples, are tentatively planned to be completed by 2026, which will be 100 years, the centennial of Gaudí's death. The Nativity facade is dedicated to the birth of Jesus. There are scenes reminiscent of elements of life. We can see in this detail Gaudí's naturalistic style. The sculptures are ornately arranged with scenes and images from nature. It's interesting to note that Gaudí had every intention of making the facade polychromed, meaning filled with color. The statues, figures, and archivolt, and the archivolt meaning the band following the curve on the underside of the ark or the ornamental molding, was also to be painted with a wide variety of colors. Gaudí wanted the humans, animals, and plants all to look alive. This is a detail of the ceiling in the nave. The columns designed by Gaudí are intended to look or to have the appearance of branches and trees. There are no flat surfaces in the interior. There are curved and jagged points along with large abstract shapes. The stained glass fills the interior areas with different colors that are intense, rich, and inspirational. The person who designed this interior is Victor Horta. This is Stairwell of Interior in the Tassel House from 1892 to 93. He was inspired by Baroque and Rococo concepts. And here we see the fluid line work, and if you look, we can see it all throughout the walls here. It goes up here and all the way up the stairwell. And then we also see it on the floor. In the railing, you can see some nice curves in the railing. Also on the top of the post, here and along the steps. All these curves and linear marks epitomize the Art Nouveau movement. Hector Guimard designed stations for the Paris Metropolitan Subway. This is a fun example of pure Art Nouveau. Even though this is an architectural structure, it seems more as a decorative sign or symbol. This is made from fabricated parts of cast iron and glass. Now these design spaces, if designed well, could incorporate architecture, furniture, textiles, ceramics, and metalwork, making it a total work of art called Gesamtkunstwerk. Moving back into painting, we are going to look at Edvard Munch. His work shows different states of emotional tension and stress, which is symbolic of the human condition. He is one of the first artists that does not suppress his conscious or subconscious emotions. He was a strong influence for the German Expressionists. He began as a French realist, but moved away from that towards a more radical group of free-thinking bohemian writers and painters. Much of his career was filled with heavy bouts of drinking and violent episodes. When he was a child, he endured some family issues that he would never fully recover from. His mother and sister Sophie died of tuberculosis. His younger brother eventually died of illness. Munch himself suffered from illness throughout his life. His father and other sister went mad and were taken away. His aunt looked after him. She was a painter who got him interested in painting. This early painting, titled "The Sick Girl," shows his sister on a deathbed as her mother grieves by her side. The sick girl bravely holds her head up with dignity, comforting her mother. It was never stated by Munch that this was his sister and mother, but his personal history no doubt inspired this painting. This is considered Munch's first masterpiece. Around this time, he studied with Bonnard in France and was introduced to the works of Gauguin and Van Gogh. He drew from the Impressionist color and brushstrokes. However, he, unlike the Impressionists, never immediately painted what he saw in front of him. He used more of their techniques rather than their subject matter. He also liked the long, flowing lines often found in the Art Nouveau movement. Munch is difficult to categorize because his work is so unique. In this self-portrait, which is one of the most widely produced images, titled "The Scream" from 1893, we see his cry of anguish and torment. It can best be described as an expression of anxiety. He claimed that he was walking across a bridge. He turned to look at the sunset and felt a scream of nature go through him. There was no escape from the nature that was all around him. This painting has become a symbol of alienation and modern anxiety. It was meant to be part of a larger project titled "Life, Love, Death: The Frieze of Life." Munch wanted to fill a gallery of life's highs and lows. If we look at Hüller's painting titled "Night" from 1889 to 1890, we see a much more almost frozen piece of work than Munch's. If you look at the central figure, you will see his shock and fear as he wakes up to find a crouching dark phantom on top of him. This is considered a self-portrait. We see him in the center and in the upper right, while his mistress and ex-wife are in each lower corner of the painting. This painting was banned by Geneva's 1892 exhibit for being indecent. It was later shown in Paris with a much better response. Here's a painting by James Ensor titled "Portrait of the Artist Surrounded by Masks," made in 1899. Ensor felt a lineage and connection towards Peter Paul Rubens, and would occasionally take on his appearance as he did in this portrait. We see him looking at us, the viewer, as he wears a fancy feathered hat, surrounded by grotesque masks that were easily found at local Flemish carnivals. Ensor's painting, titled "The Entry of Christ in Brussels" in 1889, was in response to "Le Grand Jet" by Seurat. This is a depiction of the Passion of Christ at a Flemish carnival. Ensor forces the crowd of figures into a condensed space, providing an unpleasant claustrophobic effect. This is a large painting, about 8.5 by 12.5 feet. It was said that he fashioned a portrait of Christ after his own features. And if you look, we can see this is what we're talking about here. It was seen as egotistical and conceited, and if you look at all the people around him, they are all wearing the same Flemish carnival masks as those in a self-portrait, representing the citizens as ugly and ignorant. He holds them in a sort of contempt. This painting was rejected from many exhibitions. It wasn't until 1929 when it began to be exhibited in public.